welcome to the CMIP Debate Theatre here at NAB Show 2022. For our next session, we have the evolution of remote production. To give you some background, LTN Flex Productions and Fox Sports have been an early adopter of the LTN MUX employing the transmission solution to enable home run productions. Fox Sports HRPS are produced at various facilities. The flexibility and reliability of IP transmission workflows enable greater flexibility and redundancies in signal contribution. Standardizing transmission workflows with managed IP transmission solutions extends the reach and reliability to venues only previously achievable through private line builds. And I'm absolutely certain that Mike Burke is going to have a better job at describing that myself. Over to you, Mike.
Thanks. Hi, welcome. My name is Mike Burke. I'm the General Manager for LTN Event Transmission and Production. I'm here with Brad Cheney, Fox Sports, Vice President of Remote Operations and Engineering. And we're going to talk about remote production. So, Brad, across our industry, we've seen several organizations move to remote productions, not just out of necessity due to the pandemic, but also to achieve some of the benefits of remote production, such as enhanced production, cost savings, overall efficiencies. And you at Fox Sports and Fox Sports in general have been an industry leader in harnessing those technologies and creating outstanding sports production, ultimately for the viewer. And we're proud to have been partnered with you along the way. So you and I go pretty far back as far as transmission, from standard definition to HD, 3D, all the different formats. And we've seen some challenges along the ways, but over the past, I would say 5 years, we've seen the need to expand pulling signals back from venues, frame accurate, with data as quickly, low latent, and as reliable as possible. So as LTN, during the college basketball season, for instance, we utilized our IP network and employed those technologies on an IP network in a way that had never been seen before. We were able to pull back multiple signals frame accurately from locations that were before never achievable with fiber. Either you had private line or you had satellite. So that's something that we're very proud of, and we were able to take that and combine it and provide a turnkey solution for Fox Sports. So that's something that we really want to talk about today. But I'd like to ask you if you can give us a little more background on Fox's home run production and really how it's evolved over the past few years, where it started,
back in 2015, we had a charge from our leadership group to make sure that we could do things at larger scale. And as we started to continue to add programming with the launch FS1, there was a need to be able to launch product at scale and also keep the production quality up as high as possible. And so in doing so, we looked at what we termed home run productions could do for us in that realm. And so, in 15 we started out, and in many cases you look at it kind of in twofold, in that you can look at some of your most premier properties and you can look at some of your kind of other properties, as I'll kind of allude to them as, and trying to find a balance in between them to make sure you do it. Because with premier properties, you have the ability to have lots of bandwidth, lots of resources, and a lot of skill set to be able to pull off something technically complex. And then on your lower level productions, what you have is the ability to increase their ability to produce at a consistently high level by providing interconnectivity in certain locations from that side. And so we took at it from college basketball, Major League Soccer, and the USGA on Fox, and looked at those three properties and said, how do we expand upon them and provide more reliability, better production value, and better return on investment by leveraging home run production, by leveraging the ability to send multiple signals back. And so while it started off on soccer and basketball at under 10 feeds, and so under 10 feeds is semi-manageable even in MPEG-4 back in 2015. You get good signal ratio, you can use satellite, you can use private EPL fibers, you can use ASI, so the ability and the flexibility that was there was pretty high. Now, as many of us know who do this on a regular basis, college basketball, for example, is not necessarily somewhere that's playing in major venues where this connectivity exists. And so while we were able to pick certain venues to get through a year, it was very limiting from what you could do and also the level of production that you wanted to do. And so we built a very kind of closed system for 2 years or so. And then we continued to kind of launch that in 18 with a further expansion, and then looking into 19 and 20 for us before the pandemic, which was launching the second generation of this kit. And so as technology increased, we were able to provide a kit that had HEVC encoding, had 12 encoders in it, had things that were sub-quarter of a second latency, end-to-end, whether you were on IP and then at satellite as well. It was all built into one single kit. You were still at just under a second round trip to the site. So you're allowed to have announcers on site, reporters, all those people operating the same way they did. But we were able to provide an atmosphere where the producer and director for college basketball, for example, could produce all the college basketball games for a certain either conference or, more importantly, for a certain team. And so what that allowed us to do was able to match people up with matchups in order to greater increase the production capability, because they had done the last 3 or 4 shows of Georgetown basketball, for example, or Marquette basketball, or Xavier, or any of these schools that we were doing in the Big East. And that model allowed the productions to increase in value because they understood the players, they understood what was going on, and the same thing for the replay operators, the graphics teams, and all that stuff. We're able to put more into the show because they understood what was happening. And so that technology allowed us to make that interconnectivity happen from that side, and that was the launch in early 19 for us of that second generation system, of which we launched with 4 kits by mid-2020. The second generation phase 2 came out, which is another 4 kits. So we have 8 kits that we own personally inside the fields in order to do these productions. And it's ranged all the way now through, as we got into 2020, college football. The majority of our college football is done this way. Major League Baseball is done this way. Major League Soccer is done this way. College basketball is done this way. Most all of our events have this kind of interconnected production that exists where we're taking audio and video sources from remote and bringing them back all the way to what we launched 2 weeks ago in the USFL with a collaboration with NBC, where we're bringing back an even larger subset of feeds. And so, it's that ability and that need to provide that goal set of a reasoning behind why you want to do these things. And that, for us at Fox, it really was increasing the value of the production for our stakeholders. And in doing so, this year we were able to provide, a 24 camera remote production for the Big East Women's Tournament and the Pac-12 Tournament. Pac-12 Tournament ended up being in 1080p HDR production as well, where all those signals traversed correctly across private IP networks and did that. So that led us to where we ended up with LTN and Mike Burke and the team at LTN Flex, in that we came to a point and our management team said, hey, we want to do more. Like, this is working really, really well for us. How do we do more? And we said, well, we have 8 kits, and we looked at the model and said, how do we adapt the model that we have and find a provider or a group of providers possibly to help us build a solution to further expand what we're trying to do in our time of greatest need. And so you look at, for example, the month of November for us. All of our HRP kits, we have 2 of them assigned to college basketball. We have over 80 games in the month of November. That doesn't get us a lot of events. And then as well, we still have 6 kits out on college football running. So that's our entire inventory of equipment is now out, tied up, and moving around, because college football, for all of you who don't understand this necessarily, is that college football for us is 6-day pick. We find it on Monday where we're going for Friday, Saturday games. And so from that side, it means that the equipment can't be tied up. We can't go, hey, by the way, can you just divert around and do a college basketball game? Because what looked really good 2 weeks ago and how teams are playing becomes a very large and challenging endeavor of, okay, the truck left Rutgers, New Jersey, and it's now going to San Diego State. It's not stopping in Chicago along the way, guys. It needs to get there on time, and it needs to be ready for a Thursday set day for a Friday show. And so as that's happening, we came up with a plan and talked with Mike and talked to a number of other vendors and said, hey, how do we find a solution to take up this extra bandwidth that we have and provide something that's reliable at scale and at places that honestly don't have great connectivity? And Mike and the team came back to us with a solution that leverage the LTN IP network, which leverages the public internet and also their private network that's internal to the United States, and provide a solution to us that we felt and knew was going to be of high quality. It matched our HEVC codecs, of extremely low latency, and as well, it was resilient and secure. And it had a team behind it that we knew. And so, one of the reasons, obviously Mike and I have a connection from a long time, but as well, our team at the Fox Corporation and our news group and our stations group have a very deep connection inside LTN. And so we're able to leverage those partners as well and say, hey, how is this working for you? And when they show you the reliability stats that they had on LTN, from our side, it became, really a no-brainer in what we were doing, is that they had the production capability, they had the desire to meet our goals and needs, and they had the transmission format. So when you take that together and go, instead of having to put two companies together to do something and match them up, we had one group, single source to provide this kind of programming for us. And so what started off as a question of, hey, can you do these weird venues, Mike, that has bad connectivity and you're going to get 200 or 300 megs on a public IP circuit and you're going to make this work? And the answer was?
Absolutely.
Absolutely. So in doing so, we kind of looked at it and said, okay, this is cool and this is good. And then, we did a couple shows and it worked very well for us. And then we said, well, now the kind of gloves are off. We're not going to limit this to, St. Mary's School of the Blind or any of those other programs that we're doing. We're going to take this up and we're going to put this at UConn on a Fox game. So, during the season, there was no choice of us deciding about it had to be our kit or had to be their kit or had to be anything else we were doing. We were choosing based upon what was the best logistically for Fox and for that group in order to produce that production. So in the end, Mike, I think you guys, of the 40 so shows you did with us this season, I think 12 of them were on the big network. Right. And that's a really big thing for us to say, is that to our producers and directors and our executive staff, to them there was no difference between what we had put on the ground and what the team at LTN was putting on the ground for us. Those shows looked the same, they acted the same, they felt the same from that side, and we were able to be in places that worked really well. And as well, the benefits of partnerships like this is that we're able to lock on to people that do productions in certain areas, and one of them was the Mountain West.
Right, exactly. And I think that also, when we talk about some of the challenges outside of just the logistics of cancellations and things that happen, is going to some of these universities, some of the locations, like I mentioned before, that aren't necessarily your traditional private line locations or satellite being available to you necessarily, and using IP technologies. And we found out very quickly the value in the analytics of the LTN network. Not just being able to dial in latency and have an expected latency between location and the Fox facilities, but also whenever things do go wrong, because we all know in remote productions, your bandwidth can be somewhat unreliable in locations, and LTN's analytics down to that first mile or last mile allowed us the ability to preempt some of the issues that were happening or that would have happened, that would have necessarily or likely caused on-air issues. So we were able to work around those, and I think that we mentioned before some of the transmission techniques that Brad and I have used with different IP protocols in the earlier days. This turned out to be a very good solution for Fox overall and LTN. It allowed us that reliability, and it showed us that we do have the interoperability to take third-party devices, and whether it's Fox HRP kit, or it's an LTN kit, or it's another device, and transmit that over our network with low latency and a high level of reliability, where we can be counted on for the big Fox, as you said. So outside of some of the, like I said, the logistical challenges, what would you say, Brad, were probably the biggest challenges that we faced as we really started rolling into the first probably 3 weeks of the basketball season?
No, every startup has its growing pains, and in doing so, we really had to take a deep look at the connectivity at venues. Look, there were some venues that we were in that were LTN venues to begin with, and that they had an LTN device on site to do transmission, a single path in, single path out. So we knew there was some level of reliability. But when you go from 50 megs to 300 megs of service, that's a big jump in watching those things happen. But having the ability and the knowledge of the LTN team to know that when we made a phone call, like we would make a phone call to any of the other large providers out there that provide private line circuits, ASI video circuits, or anything like that, that those people and the team at LTN was able to call up and understand where that challenge was and how to route around it if necessary, but also who to contact to make sure that that circuit got back up quickly, or the bandwidth we were asking for was actually working on that circuit. And that's one of the things that we all know as we go into these venues, is that while you may go out and hire and pay for 500 megs, a gig, 100 megs at a venue, it doesn't mean that the minute you plug in, you actually get that bandwidth. And that sometimes there's a little bit of back and forth with the provider. There are some settings that are different. There are some tweaks that need to be made. And so it's really important to make sure that you've got partners that understand that and are checking that ahead of time and making sure those things work. And I will say that the first time we go to a venue, it's always got a couple more hours built into it to make sure that we're ready. And then the second and the third and the fourth time we go there, it becomes a very normal routine setup for what we do and what we do with Mike and the team. And so, it's nice to have a NOC that's kind of centrally or East Coast located, because they're up early. A lot of college basketball games are at noon Eastern time for us. A lot of early tips, which the team in LA, I will say, doesn't love. And I can understand why. I don't like getting up at 1 in the morning to go to work. Neither do they. But in the end, they're there to produce sports, and they love what they do. So it's easy to do. So really for us, it's about having a really high level of communication, understanding what's going on, and working with partners that understand the challenges that are out there for all of us, including themselves who are going there on site to make these production happen. Because for us with LTN, this is a very turnkey production, and we use other partners in kind of a same model, even with our own equipment, in that it becomes very turnkey in that, not only did we get transmission from LTN, not only did we get the mobile unit resources from LTN, but we also get the crew from LTN. So all of those three pieces are tied together to make sure that we have a very solid show and great programming, because the core of what we do at Fox is family. And in doing so, LTN became an extension, again, of our family, and that's really important to what we do.
Yeah. And as we worked on the reliability, we proved the reliability of the IP transmission and some of the other signals that we were sending over the LTN network. I noticed that there were additional asks and additional thoughts of, hey, can we also do this as well? So how do you see remote production evolving over the next 1 to 2 years as it relates to Fox Sports and the industry in general?
No, we've got a large task in front of us to continue to improve, number one, and slowly grow what we're doing today into that range. And really our goal is to be, as flexible as possible and be providing as much as possible to our shows. And so that comes down to making sure that we're understanding our costs from A to Z, but also it's about finding efficiencies in that in order to take that money and reinvest it in the product. And so it's not necessarily about reducing costs and improving ROI. It's about improving the product, which gives you ROI, which enables our sales team and enables our affiliate distribution group to garner more money for our product. And in doing so, that helps the leagues, that helps our conference partners develop a better brand strategy for their product in order to develop what's going on. And so that's what's really important to us as we do that. And I see that this becoming something, whether we're talking about full-on HRP productions or we're talking about people and groups and systems for production being off-site, because in the end, the one thing I think that we're all seeing in this world right now is that there's a lack of talent, so to say, in that what we left 2019 with is not what we entered 2022 with. And even from that aspect, the amount of things that we're doing has grown exponentially in that point. So if we've lost 5% of the workforce and we've added 10% of shows, that's 15% of a paradigm in the middle there that's a real challenge. And so leveraging these HRP shows for us at Fox has been really beneficial, because we can continue to put the best people on it without having to fly them around. And so that was one of the things that you look at and you go, it's a travel savings. It is a travel savings, but I've got people that are traveling less, are more available to us to do shows on a daily basis, and as well have actually slept the night before. Even getting up at 1 in the morning to go to work in Los Angeles or on site or in any of these places, they're getting the rest and the sleep they need to perform at the highest level on the next day and for that next production. And that's extremely important to what we do, because it's one thing to say that you've got people, and it's one thing to say that they may not be the best people, or but again, even the best people with lack of sleep become not the greatest people. And in doing so day after day, in after out, we do well over 280 college basketball games in under 3 months. So while that's not the number of some of our other competitors and friends in this space, it's still a lot of events in a very short amount of time, which still includes the NFL, the college football, NASCAR, in those periods of time too. So it's not like we're doing one thing, we're doing multiple things at that point in time. And so, finding those people and putting them in the right spots when it matters is really important. And in many cases, we had people that would do a college football game on Friday night, they would do a noon college basketball game on Saturday, and they would do the NFL game on Sunday, all from our LA facility or all from our Charlotte facility. And so being able to do that gives us that flexibility to find the best people in the best spots and give them the best tools to succeed for us, and that shows up on the air.
Yeah, and that's something that we've noticed as well. So as more IP transmission is utilized and the operators are in facilities, having the managed service that LTN offers, we've seen calls into our operations center, and having the experience on site to provide that managed service and troubleshooting and some of the other things with a decreased crew on site has been very valuable to not just Fox but others as well. So we've had a lot of success in that area. And so overall, with the evolution of remote production, I think IP transmission is here to stay. Some of the techniques that we learned through the pandemic are also here to stay. As Brad mentioned, they were doing this well before the pandemic, and intend to grow on that. So we appreciate you allowing us to be part of that, Brad, and I think maybe we open it up to a few questions if you all are. Does anyone have any questions?
When originating from a college campus, what are the biggest problems you have, more or less? Is it a bandwidth, or is it IT policy, or trying to get things whitelisted?
It can honestly be all of those things. And the real benefit is that, having good relationships with the universities is paramount. The second piece is, allowing them to understand what you're trying to do and getting ahead of that conversation, because in many cases what worked last year doesn't work this year, because as we all evolve our IT policies, we keep continuing to change what's going on, and we even saw changes multiple times during the season at a couple different venues that we were at, where their policies changed and that next cycle of updates happens, and all of a sudden this doesn't work. And them knowing that we're coming, and them having somebody there and knowing, hey, by the way, call me if this doesn't work, or we just did a change, like that communication is really huge in what you do. But one of the things that we were very diligent about in this process was going early, plugging in early, and testing things with these groups and making sure they felt that they were part of what we were doing, because in the end they are part of what we were doing, because not only are they providing stats feeds, but they're getting video back from us as well for their programs, for their distribution, for that stuff. And when you don't have the full production on site, providing all those things for the schools, the clean feeds for the melts and the full melt and the program feed, which they can use for their digital highlights and all those other things that go on, because it's not an insular world where this just airs on FS1 or Fox. This is a world where it airs in those places, and their social media teams are pushing out stuff live as we're doing things and utilizing what we have. And so, from that aspect, it's really important to make sure that we make those connections with those teams and find those things out, because everybody's security policies change on a regular basis, and having that connection and them understanding that in some cases providing a very DMZ'd outbound for us is extremely important and is extremely beneficial to them, because it secures what they're doing as well.
And this is also where our analytics come into play as well, because with many of the universities, it was a blind send for IP transmission. You would plug in and kind of hope for the best, but by showing up early, by being able to test the bandwidth, test the reliability, having the analytics where LTN actually played a part with the local team on the ground at the university to really troubleshoot and help them resolve some of the issues that we may have seen during setup. And by the time we went to the same venues a few times, it was old hat at that point. It became much easier, and I think that as IP transmission becomes more of a norm at these college universities, we're going to see more reliability. We're going to see more engagement from the facility itself.
And as well, one of the really kind of interesting pieces was that we were able to go about and have a conversation with a couple of the schools that we were at about showing them where the bottleneck was. Because we have equipment that's better than they have. It's nothing against them. You know, when you're building a campus network, you can build it at a gig, you can build it at 10 gig, you can do all kinds of amazing things. Some of these universities have 100 gig pipes running around their campus, but they're not moving material at that level. And so when you start showing them, here's a 200 meg stream, and it's passing through your network, and it's hitting this switch, and this is the problem, it's enlightening to them, and they're learning about what their network can do and can't do, and how to re-architect it. And you know, one school, for example, did re-architect what they were doing for us because they saw that 200 megs didn't work real well through this one switch because the backplane was just flooded with a whole bunch of other stuff going on. And so, you know, for them it was really easy because they had some analytics they were able to show to their boss, who showed it to their boss. And as you can imagine, at a university, it's not real quick to buy things, but they were able to prove, like, hey, it's this, and this is really important to athletics, and athletics sent a note over to the CIO, and bang, within a week they had something changed and fixed for us. And so it's those things that, you know, when you talk about partnerships, it's partnerships across the board that really help leverage this stuff, because all of us have these tool sets that are truly spectacular and are things that honestly a couple of schools are probably going to buy in the future.
Yeah.
What challenges did your directors and producers face when they first started working in the remote environment, and how did they overcome those challenges?
So obviously when you go from something that you're seeing in real time to something that's about a second behind, you know, there is a timing challenge there on how you have to think and produce and direct what you're doing. And you know, the biggest thing I will say is having the correct attitude coming in for all of them, and having a sit down and an understanding of what's going on is important. And I think the other thing that's been very beneficial to us has been having people come in and watch somebody else do a show. So the first people taught the second people taught the third people, and it just kind of expands from that side, and it expands from the top, in that we always took it from, hey, here's what the technology is and what we're trying to do and what we're trying to achieve for you. How do we make this work? What can we give you that helps enable you to produce better from that side? And so it's been a long process from 2015 to now to do it. And obviously some of the sports we started with are a little simpler to do, so to say. It's one thing to say, you know, soccer, you stay on certain cameras for most of the show. It's kind of easy. You go to a couple of replays. It's kind of something that's semi-cut and dry, and remote helps out a lot. And it, you know, obviously it's seen because all three national providers of the MLS produce this way in most all their shows. Basketball is the same thing. It's very linear. You're not going to miss a whole lot. Baseball, not so much. And so we took the best baseball directors who had done HRPs in college basketball and MLS and these things, and put them in that room and sat them there. And we learned things like, in order to do this, we always have to have an all-9 camera up, which is a high home camera that is just static, that shows everybody the field. Because when you're starting to look through a lens, and we all know this, if you've run a camera or done that, you're always peeking around it to see what's going on. You're not in your lens the whole time. And if you're in your lens, that means the director's in your lens. And so it's providing some of those other resources to make sure that they can see what's going on and understand what's happening on the field of play, which enables them to produce a whole lot better. A college basketball, camera one's wide. You don't really need that from that side, but you know, there are a lot of other sports you have to find those things and give them those options to do that stuff. Football's another one where the all 22 is extremely important to everybody, just to understand who's coming on and off the field, things like that. You might not be seeing player numbers, but you're understanding that there's giant movement happening, and that, you know, they're going to kick, or, you know, they're going to set up a different way. So those things are, it's kind of those little things that have been beneficial. And I think the next generation of it has been, for us as well, has been replay from the field. And so super motion cameras going into you know, replay servers on site, and then using the outbounds and play them out. There's a lot there of timing that up, timing out rolls, timing those things up. And so especially in a hybrid environment, it becomes very interesting for the directors to remember that I gotta tell them to roll, and then I gotta take, versus just roll take on certain machines. And so that workflow that's there is very important. And I would say that, you know, any of us who do this on a regular basis, from all the groups that do this, on a full-time, LTN and ourselves and many other networks and many other companies, are always willing to bring people in to sit in the back and just kind of understand what it feels like, because it is different, without a doubt.
And it continues to evolve. I mean, as we go through this, it just seems like every show we get better and better and have a better understanding of the director and producer and their needs as well, like Brad was mentioning.
I'm curious what your on-site crewing footprint looks like. Like, what are those operators that are there? And then have you experienced, say, putting like a bug box operator in the remote and saying, hey, this doesn't work, we need to bring them back on site? Has there any that back and forth between specific crew positions and pushing for putting people that are on site and getting some more technology to get them to be fully remote?
Yeah, so, it's kind of a continually evolving process. The one thing that I think initially we all thought we'd get rid of was the A1. And to be honest, we're kind of dual A1s and have been for years, and probably will stay that way for quite some time, in that there's a large benefit in a lot of our shows. So, you look at MLS and college football, for example, and they all have submixers. That submixer has stayed on site while the mixer's, in the network center producing and mixing the show. So there's a lot of benefit there, because, these are still very heavy comms shows. These are still very heavy in audio for us at Fox. And so doing that has kind of, one of the positions you'd always think is like, nope, there's one A1. Well, nope, there's kind of two. So there are positions that give you that overlap of what's going on. It's important to have strong people out there, because what we're doing is not technologically easy, and it is also different. So having consistency alongside of having people who are very smart and know what they're doing enables these productions to happen. But I would say from the most part, the things that we've moved have done well, and I think that we look at every show differently. And so what is, a college football game on Saturday is not the same as the college football game on Friday, and neither is the baseball game on FS1 on Saturday to the baseball game that's on Fox, or to, things like the World Series or any of those things where you go, technologically we could do it all. It's not necessary that we actually do it all. It's necessary that we put the people in the best spot to succeed as we go forward. And that's really important in what we're doing, is trying to find ways to make sure that people succeed and that the product succeeds overall.
And overall, Brad, I just want to thank you. Over the years, you've allowed me to be an innovator, and you've been willing to try some of the technologies that we've come out with. I appreciate your continued efforts in engaging us in those areas, and I'm excited about the future of remote production. I think there's a lot of exciting things to come. I appreciate everybody attending the session, and if you have any questions afterwards, I'll be around. Brad will be around. But thank you for coming out.